Hello, and welcome. Thanks for clicking my video. Today I'll be going over which 5-star you should pick for the 17 million download celebration. But, before I tell you anything more about who you should pick, why you should pick, and when you should pick, you need to know a few things about the free 5-star. Your choice of SSRs is from the pool of story servants up to Atlantis. However, this does not include servants that were unlocked from the story, so yes, this means no Cetonai or Alter or Odysseus. Furthermore, in order to get the servant of your choosing, you have to exchange with a ticket. This ticket can be found in your limited missions tab, which is a tab next to the weekly and extra missions. Once you have decided on your SSR of choosing, the servant is not permanently added to your roster. You have to ascend the servant once and reach bond level 5. You have time from the day this event goes live with the ticket until June 15th, 9 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Okay, now we got that out of the way, and you understand how to get your servant, let's talk about who you should get. So I made a tier list based on my experience playing the game from launch day up till today. This is not like a total comprehensive full damage list on like who's the best, this is who you should pick, here's 100 reasons why. Pick him or pick her. And this isn't like statistically this servant is best for this upcoming event, or the servant's getting like a new rank up in 6 months maybe, so by the time that event comes out the servant will shine. This is just who I think is really good overall and why I think so, and maybe why I put him there. When I mention a servant, I'm pretty much only looking at their current skill set. I might like include a little bit about rank ups if it's already out, or if it's like about to come out in like a month, but nothing like a 2-year rank up or like an NP buff in a year and a half. And remember, regardless of what I tell you or what I think is good, the most important person in deciding who you pick is yourself. Because if you have some waifu or husbando you really want, just pick them. This game is a free to play single player game. There's no multiplayer, there's no combat, there's no online PvP. Okay, it's just if you like someone, pick them, because after all you have to grind their bond level to 5, and it's a lot easier to use a servant you like versus one you don't. Alright, so that's enough stalling, let's just move on with the list. First, we have the man, the legend himself, Lord Elmalloy II, Shuge Liang, or commonly known as Waver for the Fate Zero fans out there. If you don't have him, and you're looking to get one of the best servants in the game to date, then yeah, pick him. He's been good since release. He's never not bad. He's just the best generic support caster in the game. All of Waver's skills are amazing. The first skill is a single target ally NP charge of 30% and an insane crit buff. The second and third skill are both team-wide NP charges at 10% each and give an amazing stat on each defense and attack. Yeah, he's pretty fucking good. Next, we have Tamamo. She is in the realm of the god tier support casters. She's just slightly below the triple gods of Castoria, Merlin, Scotty. And I'd consider Waver up there just because he's the, hey, you're not sure if you want to loop or some shit, you're not sure if you want a full buster team, yeah, just take Waver. So there's the 4 gods themselves, and I'd put Tamamo just below them because she's an amazing support caster. She becomes even better when Castoria comes out in a few months. And she just makes arts teams good. She is what makes arts teams. She's able to stall well. She's able to heal. She's able to buff your servants. She's a great waifu. Honestly, she literally is a waifu. That's her whole purpose, is to be your wife. So who can pick a better waifu? The downside and what really separates Tamamo from being up there with Waver is that her skills themselves don't charge NP at all, which is why I feel like she does need Castoria to be up there. The only way you can continually get good art NPs off is with art chains to get the 20% charge. Otherwise, Tamamo is she's just A+. She'd be S if like maybe she had one skill that could give NP up to herself or an ally. In the next tier at A, we have these 2 hot boys. Both are great buster single target servants, but there's something that differentiates them from each other. Enkidu is a single target damage dealer, and Hishi, they do a lot of damage. A lot of their skills after rank up are great for sustaining themselves, and they enable more damage. And he hits like a fucking truck. Ozzy also does great damage, but he, however, is more of a support single target damage dealer, which is kind of weird to say, but his skills, not only do they buff himself, they buff his allies. And he has a 20% NP charge on everyone, and he still hits like a fucking truck. He has a debuff and NP seal on enemies when he NPs. Honestly, if you need a single target buster servant, both of these are pretty good to fucking go. Depending on what you need, either husbando is great. We go to the next tier, and one of my personal favorite servants in this whole list is Achilles, the man of a legend himself. He's a great AoE quick servant, a hot man of Greece, and he's capable of looping with Scotty. You just need certain team comps to do it, but you can loop with Achilles pretty decently. Typically you do need a max K scope, unlike Dante, who you don't always need the max K scope. Achilles is almost necessary for the loops. His skills are great. He has a self 30% NP charge, and the charge itself is able to apply self-target. The self-target works great with his invincibility skill, and he has an amazing quick buff. The next one we have here is Karna. He's the other AoE servant I put here in this B+ tier, and he is pretty fucking good. He has a 25% charge, a buster buff, a damage buff, and he has a buster defense decrease on NP and an NP seal skill. He's good for the longer fights. He does a lot of damage, and he can get a couple NPs off, which is pretty good. I do enjoy farming with him. And he has a costume if you've cleared Lost Belt 4. Next, I'll talk about the two single targets here. We got Jack Zaberper and Sanzang. Jack is a really amazing assassin. She has great value on her crits, and she gathers them like it's fucking butter. Her skill diversity is really her bread, since her stars are her butter. She can remove buffs on enemy on a 6-turn CD, and has a great dodge buff as well. And her damage is just monstrous when you use her dodge buff to buff her quick. And you have a crit on that quick. Not to mention, her NP really shines if the enemy is a female. Next, we have the servant at the top of my personal list, and the one I'm probably going to be picking, and will be picking, more than likely, is Xuanzang. She's one of the full single target buster casters in the game. Her and Caster Ilia, as of right now. That's a 5-star. And she can dish out some good damage. And not only does she dish out pretty good damage, her skills let her be a fucking tank, which is something casters typically don't do well. Not to mention, she's still a caster, so for some reason she gives good team buffs. She has an 80% NP battery, even though it's a 7-turn CD. And her team buff is an NP gain, critical gain, and debuff immune. Team-wide. It's pretty good. Even though Ilia is right now my current go-to single target caster, I definitely am eager to switch to Xuanzang because I have pulled for her and come up nothing. Come up maidenless. Alright, nearing in about the halfway mark at the B tier. It's time we talk about the face of the Fate franchise and one of my favorites as well, Saber. Saber, Artoria, Altria, Arthur, Miss Baber, whatever you decide to call her just now, she is the waifu herself. She's an all-arounder type buster AoE servant. She doesn't do the most damage out of all Saber AoEs, but she does hit like a good truck when she does want to isekai full. She has a pretty good attack buff charisma on her team. She gains stars, and her NP charge is just short enough cooldown at 5 turns. And it's a good 30% NP charge. Her NP refunds 20% itself, so you're looking at 50% if you do NP. And then you have your skill up again. Later on, with a certain Fairy King and a certain Assassin Fox, you can loop with Artoria. She's one of the loopers for that buster looping. Moving on. Now, I feel like my B tier is probably different than other people's B tiers. I haven't really researched what tier list people make or who they suggest. But I do want to talk about Ganesha slash Jinako. First, I didn't think much of her, but she's grown on me, and not just in appearances. Her skills do a lot. Like, they literally, there's a lot of words on it. They do a lot of things. If you don't like reading, probably don't pick her. She's not the best for people that don't read. However, this game has a lot of reading, so you probably like reading. In which case, it's good that you like reading because you're playing. Okay, whatever. She's an NP and attack buff team-wide at 20% on a 6-turn CD. Her other skills are also equally good, even if they are gimmicky. Her next skill applies to target self and reduces damage taken via damage cut, and a self-attack buff, all in the same skill. Her last skill gives target allies invincibility and increases their NP gain at the cost of sealing their skills. Of course, to circumvent this cost, you can just use all the other skills on the ally before you use Jinako's skill on them. So if you have all 3 skills on cooldown and their skill sealed for 1 turn, it doesn't really matter. So it's not really a bad cost for a good buff. Her NP is AoE arts, but the main attraction is the effects. She decreases enemy defense and applies invincibility for herself as well as heals herself. So pretty much she's like the support tank AoE damage arts dealer. And even though she doesn't do one of those categories I said perfectly, she does them pretty well. She hits decently fine, she supports pretty good, and she debuffs pretty well, and tanks well. So there you go. Also, she's one of the 4 moon cancers available, and she is not a 4-star, so she's not the free one. If you don't have BB, then here's your pick. You need a moon cancer? Perfect. Rare class. That's why I do value her so high, is the class rarity as well. Next we have Drake and Napoleon. They're both great AoE busters. They have pretty similar skill sets, but I'll talk about Drake here first. Drake has a great battery at 50%, and it gains a good amount of stars. She also has a self NP gain up and an NP buff on allies. Her NP is also AoE buster, and it also gives a good amount of stars. So pretty much, she's really good at farming, and she does it pretty fucking well. She farms casters really well, and FGO has a lot of farming content, so that's why I put her here at B. I feel like half this game is probably just mindless farming, especially early on, and early events too. If you want someone that just put like a 50% CE on charge, hey, you got some stars, NP, hey, you got some more stars back, Drake's your girl. She's great. Next we have Napoleon. He's very similar to Drake as well. He has a self NP battery, only at 30%, not 50. But he does gain stars on that, just like Drake. He has a team-wide damage buff and increases NP damage, just like Drake. And his NP also drops stars, just like Drake. However, Napoleon's buffs overall are stronger, so he does hit harder. But he does charge NP less, and he gives less stars in a single turn. But because his stars are over 3 turns, he does give more overall stars. Honestly, if I wasn't such a Xuanzang simp, I would definitely go with Napoleon's big Doc. Because he is just so tall and attractive and... Anyways. Next we have Orion. And this is a really weird one to put on here, because I think a lot of people undervalue Orion. But I will say, if you don't have like Emiya Alter or Archer Saber, Orion is an amazing stand-in. I pulled Orion when the game first came out, and I believe she was like the first event or the second event banner unit. And for the longest time I didn't use her. And then the summer banner came out and I didn't get Saber Archer. I found myself using Orion over the course of time, and there are a lot of times where her NP alone saved my ass. Her NP alone on the NP charge decrease is great. She is an arts unit, so she is capable of, you know, being a Tamamo receiver or Castoria receiver or John receiver, or any sort of art stall team, MASH included. So she does that really well. If the enemy happens to be male, then she does even more damage with her first skill. She has a self-defense and attack, or her second skill, sorry. She has a self-defense and attack up, and an OK dodge skill. If you need like a Saber archer single target, and you feel like Chloe is just a nuker, not a staller, Orion's a really good choice, in my opinion. I feel like the longer fights is really where Orion shines. Next, we have Mo-san. Well, I think she is maybe cuter than her father overall, especially with the new outfit we just got. The son does almost exactly the same thing as her dad. However, her damage just, every time I use her, feels a little bit lackluster. And it really doesn't feel like, unless you meet the requirement of fighting a Saberface, it feels like most of the time in a generic quest against Lancers or like Berserkers, and I just want to bust her AoE Saber. I'm rather happy I have Altria over Mordred. I'll take both of them a lot of time, and more often than not, Mordred's damage will just be a little bit less than Altria. And for characters that have the same skills, why would you take the lesser version? Unless you like the lesser version, because she's fucking cute and adorable. But Mordred does shine, again, if you're fighting a Saberface, so there's that gimmick. And that's why I keep her right here at C+. Otherwise, she'd probably be down to C tier. Next up, we have Bradamante. She has a great skill set. And I really like her lance. She's a good quick lancer AoE, but she is inconsistent at looping with Scotty. And that's her downside. She's a quick AoE lancer, but she can't loop with Scotty. So even though there's a 5-star guaranteed SSR servant tier list, I find most of the time thinking, why am I taking Bradamante instead of Parvati? And Bradamante does a little bit more damage, but more often than not, it feels like Parvati is the better overall pick since I'm using quick. Her skills are really good though. Her NP charge is a 30% NP charge on 5 turns. She not only buffs her quick cards, but her arts cards, so she can get NP faster. She has a good guts buff. Her damage is great. It just feels like once you full combo with her, it's hard to get back into like a groove again. It just feels like she doesn't generate enough crits on her own. And as a quick arts hybrid, she kind of needs those crits. And so as an overall package, she's just slightly below the servants above her. Next, I'll talk about Osakabehime. I think she's really adorable, really cute. I got spooked by her, and I do like her. But she's just a good support. I feel like she's not a great support. She's not Jinako. She's not Sanzang. She's not Ozzy. She's not Tamamo. She's not Waver. Even though I said Ozzy and Sanzang and they're not really supports, I feel like I'd probably rather have Ozzy over Osake, even if it's against a rider type enemy, just because I feel like Ozzy just does more than Osakabe can. But let's talk about her skills real quick. She overall feels like a quick support servant that doesn't really buff quick servants. She kind of just buffs their crits. She also removes buffs and increases tankiness on everyone on her NP, but she doesn't really support any particular unit. She feels like she was designed to be the crit support assassin, but she doesn't support assassins or quicks. She feels like even though she's designed to be the quick support assassin for other assassins, her skill set's just like a generic support skill set. And that's where I have trouble placing Osakabe any higher. So I have Anastasia and Europa here, mainly because I just don't use them enough. As a matter of fact, just finding an Anastasia, friend or not friend, to use for this video was hell. I couldn't even find a Europa, so I couldn't get any footage of her. Anastasia's not bad. She's really good at arts damage and AoE arts damage, but for some reason, a lot of casters are AoE arts, so There's others that can fill the void. If you're an Anastasia fan, of course she's great. Her AoE NP arts also happens to skill seal and decrease their damage. She also has a 50% battery that can stun enemies, but sits on the 7-turn CD, which is just slightly too long. She has 50% arts buff to go with her NP damage. Arts cards buff to go with her NP damage. Other than hitting hard with her arts NP and being a target for Castoria looping, she doesn't really do much else. And her damage really falls short when her self arts buff is on cooldown. So other than that, it feels like you're just waiting on your cooldowns again. And a 7-turn cooldown just feels a little too long. Her arts cards are pretty good though, and she does generate NP pretty fast. But then you're hitting kind of weak. Europa. She has a pretty good self-damage buff, which is a 30% buff on Buster Arts and an NP charge all at the same time, all at 30%. Her debuff is also equally good, being a charm, a defense down, and a critical rate down on all of that. She has an AoE Buster NP that decreases enemies' defense, and she's an all-arounder. She's good. She's good at farm. She's just an all-arounder, but she lacks in the farming department, which Drake excels at. She lacks the hard-hitting factor Achilles has, so I have to put her lower than both Achilles and Drake. As an AoE rider, I feel like she doesn't fill the void either of those units fill. As a result, if I had to make a suggestion, Achilles is really fucking good. Drake is good. Europa is cute. Let's talk about Altera, Arjuna, and a horse. The 3 A's that are not in A tier. Altera is a tan goddess. She's good. She's a good AoE saber, and she hits really hard. She has a strong self-attack buff that grants stars, a team-wide NP buff on allies, a self-heal, and a Buster AoE NP. Every time she hits, it feels like a fucking truck hit the enemy. But without her buffs, it feels like a car hit the enemy, not a truck. She doesn't really generate her NP very well. She doesn't have skills that can do that either. She can't generate stars for herself that well either after her one skill is on cooldown. And it just feels like she needs a lot of resources to optimize her well. And even when you do optimize Altera, it feels better to just put your resources into like an Artoria or an Mordred even. It feels like when you use Altera, you're more playing around her basic cards than any particular skill set or combo or NP mechanic. You're just like, Altera, all your cards hit pretty well. Let's just keep hitting a little bit harder. And this is coming from someone with an Altera NP5. Next, let's talk about Arjuna. He kind of falls in the similar boat with Altera, but his case is he's lacking the damage. His skills are okay, but it's the damage he doesn't have, which puts him at the C tier. Altera has the damage, it's her skills that are lacking. He has a 25% NP charge, however it's on a 10-turn CD, which is really long. It means you probably only get this once. His AoE Buster NP is lacking damage, even with his own self-buster buff. Overall, there's better alternatives for AoE archers. We have Xiang Yu. Sorry, my Chinese is not great. Now, a lot of people probably think Xiang Yu should be higher, because he is a fucking menace. And I probably should put him higher, to be honest. He's pretty fucking good. He's a dope horse. I would like to ride him. Oh yeah, and he's a berserker. He does what a lot of berserkers do. He hits everyone like a horse with a lot of horsepower. He hits them with a lot of horsepower, yeah. However, he's a little different than other berserkers because he is a quick berserker. And not only is he a quick one, he's AoE. Most berserkers are not quick service, and that's mainly due to the fact that they do have not the best critical star gather rate, meaning that his cards are not going to be defaulted to have more stars than other character cards. Like a Saber or Archer is going to gather stars as a higher priority than Xiang Yu will, being a berserker. So you're more reliant on skills to fill that void. That being said, he does have a skill that gathers C stars, so it's not too much of a worry. He also generates his own C stars, which is pretty good, not to mention he has quick chains. That is also really good. However, the problem there lies in is he's just a glass cannon. He has a 1-turn evade, but once he gets hit, he's going down, it feels like. He can't really protect himself. He just hits really, really, really hard. But hey, sometimes you need that, so. At least compared to the other two here in C tier, he does do his thing very fucking well. If you want someone that hits hard, Xiang Yu is probably one of the best ones here. Next we have Jeanne. Now, the reason I have Jeanne here at D+ is Jeanne is just really adorable. No. Jeanne is adorable, but we don't have her Orleans outfit. And for that, we don't have her Apocrypha outfit. We don't have her casual Orleans outfit. I can't accept that. The light works. I mean, Liz Engel. Like, really? What are you doing? Anyways, she's a really, really good support unit for her team comps. What that means is she's really good for art stalling because she's a support unit that heals and stalls. That's it. She tanks for everyone. She's invincibility. She heals for everyone and she removes debuffs, and that's all on her NP alone. And then her skills, they also stall. She reduces NP damage on a servant for 1 turn. She can stun a servant, but only a servant. So she's only good in certain boss fights. And she generates stars. She doesn't hit super hard. She's a ruler. So you're taking her to not take damage. You're not taking her to do damage. But, you know, when you put her with the right team like Tamamo, Jeanne, and a damage dealer like Orion, you have a pretty good art stall comp. And hey, that's, you know, if you could make a comp out of the 3 free SSRs that are all arts, that's probably one of the best comps you can make out of these 3 alone. So for that, if she isn't in the right comp, she doesn't feel like a worthy pick. And that is why I put her so low. Next we have Florence Nightingale, a medic that's gone berserk. She has a support arts NP that heals and removes debuffs on all allies and a whopping 50% attack reduction on enemies. She also has a target heal for an ally which has debuff immune. The problem are her other 2 skills are just not good. And I'll get to that in a moment. She has a self-damage buff against humans, and a self-buster buff for 3 turns on both herself. She only has 2 buster cards in her deck, and her damage is only on cards, since her NP is a support heal. So she doesn't really hit hard enough, even though she has 2 skills that focus solely on buffing herself. She doesn't really get crit stars either, being a berserker. So you have someone that can never buster chain on her own. Can't really crit with the busters. And then she has her own arts chain, but she can't buff her own arts cards. It's a really weird mix, and like, I understand the thought of making like an arts support combat medic, like she's there to heal and like keep the fight going, but then like she's also gonna just kill everyone. But in actuality, the design just feels really lackluster. It's kind of sad because playing through the America Singularity, you end up liking Nightingale, even as a berserker. It just feels like a not finished unit. So that's why I have to put her here. Next, I'm going to actually talk about Vlad here. Even though he is an E tier. And caster of Nightless, of the Nightless city, is in D tier. It almost feels like they should be swapped. And maybe I should swap them. But I already made this and I don't want to remake the image, so I'm going to just go with my gut. This list is pretty much my initial impression of them. Vlad kind of struggles with the same problem as Nightingale. However, at least he does a little bit more damage than Nightingale, since they're both berserkers. Even though it's single target, he has the damage NP. He is able to be tankier and has a self-guts and a good defense buff. He also has an NP drain on one of his skills on a single enemy, so he can self-chain with his arts at least, and it does damage. But the problem is, for a single target damage berserker, he's an arts berserker, and he just doesn't do enough damage. I don't see why, if you're picking a berserker class, why you wouldn't pick Xiang Yu or Florence. At least Florence can stall some weird fights, especially with like Tamamo or Jeanne, especially on her NP. Nightingale's NP has a 50% attack debuff on enemies, which means that turn, if you have like a waiver defense buff, you're taking close to 0 damage, at least with Nightingale NPs. When Vlad NPs, it feels like a lot of the times he doesn't even kill them as a single target berserker, and that just feels really underwhelming. So again, if you want damage for berserker, Xiang Yu's your guy. If you want some weird stall comp and you already have Jeanne and Tamamo, you don't like Orion, Nightingale's not bad either. So picking Vlad just feels like the worst of those two, and there's no reason to put him higher than either, so as a result I put him lower. Last but not least, let's talk about Caster of the Nightless City. Pretty much just feels like an Anastasia knockoff. She doesn't have a NP battery that Anastasia does. She however does have the random charge skill, but it's not guaranteed. And she has a team-wide guts buff. Her NP is AoE arts, but doesn't do much damage unless the enemy is a king. If you're looking for an arts AoE NP looper, I would pretty much just go with Anastasia, not Nightless caster. And with that, we are done. So that's my take on who to pick for your free SSR ticket. And since I know everyone was really wondering the more important tier list, here's my tier list on the best waifu and husbando. Out of all the options available for the ticket, yes, I do have the waifus above the husbando. Yes, I do die on that hill. Hopefully this helped some people decide, and for those who it did not help, I'm sorry. If anything, I hope I didn't make your decision harder. But if that's the case, my last piece of advice is don't dwell on it too long, since all these servants are possible to get spooked on any banner at any point, since they're always in the pool to be summoned. So hopefully you end up getting the servant or servants you want. Thanks again for watching. I did try to make this video short, but I know I ended up rambling. Even though I wanted to keep it concise and clear, I could have gone more into depth about each of these servants' strengths and weaknesses, like how their NP generation works or C-star works, what comps really shines, which comps they shine in, when their rank ups make them good or bad, or what events really are like who you should use. But I think one of the main points of FGO is making a random comp with servants I like and just seeing what I can do with that and how far it goes. So I felt like just giving what lets the servants shine, that should be what's talked about, not just straight up mathematical logic. I feel like you can find that on the wikis or elsewhere on YouTube. I feel like opinionated is where it should be. Anyways, sorry for rambling. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.